A gay pacifist Zionist French philosopher has been banned from entering Britain because somehow he represents a threat to the reigning paradigm. And I think that that's really just because he says, maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't flood Europe with immigrants and replace the indigenous population with foreign populations from overseas. Now, actually, this isn't a terribly controversial position for most normal people. Most normal people in any country, anywhere in the world, actually don't think that an unlimited open border policy that ends up bringing in as much of the world as possible to displace the native population of a country is a good thing. Nobody is in favour of this, apart from the people who run our country. And so they treated him as if he was a terrorist or someone who would inspire terrorism, which is just remarkable. So as you can see, he was banned because the Home Office, which is a very diverse institution, ruled that his presence would go against the public good. Well, which public's good? Like, the indigenous people of Britain don't really have a problem with his message, since now 70% of people in this country think that immigration has gone too far and needs to be stopped. They agree with him. Most people agree with him. He has a very mainstream and normal position, and yet somehow a handful of people, again in very diverse institutions, get to decide who we get to listen to. In an email seen by The Telegraph, the Home Office informed Mr. Camus that he had been denied entrance because your presence in the UK is not considered to be conducive to the public good, because he was supposed to go and speak at the Homeland Party's remigration conference, and the UK government decided that, you know what, we don't have enough of? That's right, the Streisand effect. What we need to do is intercede to make sure that this otherwise, again, very normal position in British political thinking, this speech about this would have been heard by maybe a couple of hundred people and maybe a couple of thousand people online. Now we need to make sure that this is a national news story, an international news story, because this does speak to the priorities and the deeply misaligned concerns that the British state has for its own people. Because remember, we allow pretty much any insane radical Islamist under the sun to come and speak here. For this one particular Hatham al-Haddad was invited to the BBC to discuss the riots, the Israel-Palestine riots. And he was called, quote, a highly respected imam. And obviously there's a list of extreme things that he said a mile long. Of course there is. Of course there is. And there were a bunch of others a couple of months ago that Patrick Christie's reported on, and it was Patrick's reporting that actually managed to get at least one of them prevented from entering. Because, again, these are, and again, we call them extreme, but from their own perspectives, they're actually very normal as well. Because we have two very diametrically opposed and distant philosophies on how the world should operate and how things should be done. And these people think things that and preach things that we in the West, whether we are liberals or conservatives or traditionalists or whatever, or radical progressives, we think these things are generally barbaric. We think these things are a way of life that we ought not to replicate in Britain. And yet for some reason, they still get invited here. And when we get one guy who says, and I'll give you a few quotes of his later, maybe actually allowing these people to come and live in the West and in fact become the majority population of the West is not wise for, I don't know, women, gays, Jews, like any other minority groups you can think of. When someone like that says, look, I actually have a real philosophical insight into why this might be bad, as if one was actually needed, they get banned. And that's pretty remarkable given who's not banned, right? Like, okay, one 78-year-old gay French Zionist pacifist philosopher, definitely not. Any number of radical imams, fine. Also, whoever can break into the country, right? Renaud Camus should just have got on a bloody boat and sailed across. And then he would have been brought in at Dover and they'd be like, oh, well, you're a refugee, you should have claimed asylum. He would have been in a hotel like that. He would have been given taxpayer money. I mean, obviously, I'm sure he wouldn't have done this. I'm sure the man has some dignity, but you know what I mean? Like, nearly 2,000 strangers, just total randoms, have broken into our country in the last week. This is more than 8,000 this year now. Obviously, as the weather gets better in the spring, the numbers start ramping up. And what's happening? What's Labour doing? Nothing. They've lost control of it. They don't know what they're doing. We just have no choice but to pick them up, bring them in, give them loads of money, give them accommodation, and make sure they stay here forever. But one French philosopher is one too many, to be honest. Now I've said that, it kind of sounds based. But the point being, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was espousing a position that actually most people in the country agree with. Connor's got some pertinent quotes here, right? And Camus was the person who coined the term Great Replacement, which has been called an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, but I don't really see where the anti-Semitism comes in. I think that actually this is being used as a smokescreen because the powers that be are well aware that actually, if you look at London, if you look at Birmingham, if you look at Leicester, if you look at Luton, if you look at Sheffield, if you look at just loads of our major cities, they're not looking like English cities anymore. And this is from one essay. He says, quote, "One hesitates to identify interest as the principal motor of replacist ideology and its lies, for one cannot fail to take into consideration all of the groups that nobly support, promote and diffuse these deceitful dogmas against their own interest, often of the most immediate kind, and who are sometimes just beginning to regret it. Jews, women, homosexuals, secularists, champions of free thought and free expression, all cheerfully busy soaring off the branches on which they sit, alongside the heralds of diversity, who themselves do not perceive that they are in fact only making more of the same, always more of the same, the undifferentiated universal village, or rather the generalized suburb." And that's another great point. The areas that have been UKified in England aren't really very different to one another. Like, I went through London yesterday, all the way from like the southeast across it. And those areas that have been UKified are just a kind of miscellaneous soup of random people all from across the world wearing basically the same clothes, wearing like modern American clothes when they're not wearing some very strange foreign garb. But the point is, it gives the entire area a distinct sort of alien impression, like the sort of, Cantina or Mos Eisley or something. It's very, very strange that this isn't diverse, actually. You can see exactly the same kind of thing anywhere this culture is brought. And so this isn't a diversity, even if that was desirable and we never asked for it. This is actually a homogeneity. And that's a great point. But again, this is why they don't want him speaking, because he actually has some good points on this issue. Anyway, he put out a statement today about this, saying, look, 3 things in Britain that are even worse than I thought. The extent of the change of people and civilization is worse than he expected, which is definitely true. When I took Eric Zemmour around parts of London, he was just gobsmacked. Absolutely gobsmacked. Things are very bad. This is why John Cleese is saying, look, London is not an English city anymore. That's true, but neither is Birmingham, neither is Leicester, neither is Luton, neither are many other places in England. And this is not good. And then secondly, the crushing of freedom of expression. Yes, well, Britain doesn't have free speech, and we know we don't have free speech. It's expressly legislated against in the law, and the police and authorities are just very, very swift to pick up on this. And 3, the extent of social communism, which is an interesting term because I think this is correct. What Heidegger called American communism. I think he's talking about wokeness here. That false and unbearable immediate industrial intimacy marked by a new sole reign of the first name. And this is another great point. The civilization of first names. People no longer have names, as in surnames, because they no longer have a history, no longer have a race, and this is obviously one of the conditions of one. Yet people are just, like, for example, I would never have called my teachers by their first name when I was in school, but it's the sort of thing that's beginning to happen now. And this is why it's quaint and important, actually, when Peter Hitchens insists on people calling him Mr. Hitchens. Why not? Why should we not be the civilization of the surname? Anyway, the point is, you can see why Renaud Camus is someone whom the British government and the Home Office think is not appropriate to come into Britain, because he would simply be against the reigning order, whereas the radical imams are apparently not against the reigning order. Somehow they are compatible with the civilization they are trying to build, whereas a French philosopher who is a well-wisher to our civilization is not.